Hi, it's Ian. Welcome back to 30 Days of Knife Skills. This is day 12 and we are working with garlic. So there are a lot of different ways that people approach the use of garlic, how to peel it, how to cut it, all these things. So we'll talk about some of the ones that I've seen and the ones I've used. So the first thing with garlic is we need to get these, from the bulb, we need to get these cloves separated. And before I peel them the way I normally do, there are a couple ways that some people recommend doing them. I'm not sure if you've seen this one, but one of them is to put it in some kind of a container. It could be a jar, or in this case, I have two metal bowls, and just shake. Did it work? Not really. Didn't quite do the job. So maybe for some garlic it works. For this one, obviously it didn't quite work. So yeah, I do not use that one anyway. Another way that I think probably works better is to use a mortar and pestle, which I use all the time. I don't usually peel garlic this way unless I'm about to use this for something and it's there anyway. So the idea is that you just put them in there, however many you're working with, and just kind of crush, pound until the skins loosen. And then if you keep going, obviously the garlic will be crushed and you should be able to just take the peels out like that. So this does work for this garlic. There is this piece left over though, which I do not like, that hardness. I think it depends on the garlic. Some garlics will be fine, but I always cut that off, so it's still a two-step process. Today, by the way, I have my nakiri, which is a Japanese vegetable knife. Thought I would change it up a little bit for today, since I do not need a pointed tip for anything that we're doing today. So mortar and pestle, that works, especially if you're going to just continue and pound and, let's say, make a hummus or some kind of pesto or something that requires crushing like that. The way I do it usually is with a knife. I think that's quite also very common. The two different ways I've seen are either first make a cut and then smash, or first smash and make a cut. I tend to smash first, so I'll put the knife flat and it comes right off. If it doesn't come right off, usually, like I was saying, I take off that hard end bit. So if I take that off, if I cut into that, the peel will usually come off very, very easily. So this one happens to come off pretty easily. So some people recommend taking this, making that first cut and then smashing to make it release better. Anything like that where sometimes this garlic skin is tough. Any kind of task like that, I always use the heel of my knife. So no matter what kind of knife it is, I always, for those kinds of tasks, I will, for a few different purposes. One is that it's close to your hand and you'll be able to get more weight into it. Also, especially if you put the tip down first and then go down, it's a safer way. You won't be slipping, doing something weird. I don't really like doing it in the hand because, again, it could slip. Sometimes the skin is pretty tough and you might need to put a little effort into it and could be dangerous. So you make that cut and then smash, and then the peel should come off in one piece like that. If you wanted to continue smashing, you could just keep going and do a few more smashes to get it almost in a crushed state. That'll get kind of give you a head start on that. So it would look like this. So it's already, this might be okay for some things. For example, if I was going to throw it into a long cooking soup and I know it's going to break down anyway, or sometimes if I'm doing a pasta sauce with just olive oil, garlic, chilies, something like that, anchovies, maybe a few tomatoes. I might want it kind of kept whole like that and then brown it like that. So that could be okay. Otherwise, you could go in and go into the mince. So this is one spot where I go back to the forward end of the knife for fine tasks like that. I think thinking about which part of the knife you're using for which task is always a good idea. It's a good habit to get into. A lot of times we don't do fine detail work so much with the heel. So cutting hard things with this part makes sense, because if this part of the knife dulls faster than this part of the knife, that's not going to be too bad, because we won't be trying to do fine cutting in general with the heel portion. And this knife is actually a carbon steel knife, so something like garlic or onion is acidic and it will react with the carbon steel. So I will wipe it off in between if I'm going to pause for a second. So that was the wet wipe, dry wipe. If I need to leave for a few minutes, just doing that will take care of the problem. So it should not react or oxidize or rust or anything like that. So those are some of the ways to peel. Another common way to use garlic is to slice. So again, I'm going to use the tip portion, use our good technique of curving the fingers in, keep the thumb behind, and I use a thrust in general. Japanese method of cutting, thrust cut this way, instead of a rocking motion like this. This works fine too. Not in the case of this knife. This knife is quite flat in the profile, meaning the blade edge, the cutting edge, is almost straight. There's no roundness here. So there's a little bit of roundness. You could roll it, but it's not the best use of that. This kind of knife excels really, really well in this kind of a thrust or push cut. So I'm coming down and slightly forward at the same time. Makes a lot of contact with the board, and I could cut a lot of things at once. If I was in a hurry and I wanted to stack up a whole bunch of ingredients together, I can do that because there's so little roundness in the belly that in one hit, a big part of that blade will make contact with the board, so I can actually save quite a bit of time. In general, Japanese knives have a more flat belly profile, which again, for other knives as well, which works well for that thrust cutting, and maybe not quite as suited as European style knives for the rocking. So not that you can't do rocking with this kind of knife or other Japanese knives in general, unless it's a very, very extremely perfectly flat. This one you can see has a very, very slight curve here. So that was a slice. If I was going to do a mince, then I would do a long, elongated slice first, and then turn the whole thing, and then again using the tip. And then if I want it smaller and smaller, I'll just keep going like that. Garlic is one of those things that it does get sticky, and sometimes it sticks all over. Quick fix is to wet your knife. You could run it under the faucet or have a wet towel like I have here, and just take that stickiness, remove that, and it won't stick nearly as much to your knife. It's a good trick that I use quite a bit. If I want it smaller than the fine mince I just did, then it's going to be, the next two choices will be the grater, which I use probably more than the garlic press. So the garlic press, you can have peeled cloves like this and it works fine. You can also use unpeeled cloves. It should work fine. Unless there's a lot of peel, it might be a little bit hard to get out. The downfall with this is that sometimes the size is an issue and you can't quite get it in, so In that case, if the clove is too big, you can just cut it in half, or you can peel it and it'll make it a little bit smaller, but it's that simple. Just and then take some kind of a tool, scrape it off, and then if you want to do another one or just want to clean it out, I like to use either a knife like this or a back of a spoon or a fork and just clean it out like that, and you're ready for the next one. If it's a peeled one, maybe you could do 2 in a row before you need to clean it out, but and also sometimes there's a little bit here. You can see a little bit left over, so I'll scrape that in to the dish. So garlic press is quite useful. You can get a lot done very quickly. I think I probably use this more often because I'm using this for other tasks more often, and the fact that it's very, very uniform. So once I start grating, and if I was going to do a grating job, then I would not smash so much. You can see this one is kind of half broken because I smashed it with a knife. I would be a little more delicate if I knew that I was going to grate it. But this grated, it's much finer and more consistent than using the press. So there's some instances where I do not want to eat bits of garlic. I want it to meld into whatever I'm using and incorporate better. So then I'll use the grater, and then usually I'll just or scrape it off, and it's pretty simple to do that. So that's pretty much how I use garlic in general. Sometimes I'll just keep it whole. It could be like a roasting thing, or if I want to flavor something that I'm roasting. For example, on the grill, oftentimes I'll take foil, wrap vegetables in it, and then maybe I'm just trying to season that whole bag of foil of vegetables, and I might leave the garlic just whole so that it's not in little pieces, but it's just seasoning the whole thing. The other reason to leave it whole would be to slow roast it, or anything where it could just disintegrate, for example, in a soup or a long cooked stew or something like that, or something pressure cooked. Usually everything breaks down pretty easily. So, of course, we could also roast the whole garlic whole, so without breaking it apart. And in that case, I would usually take off that root end. So here's another spot where using the heel, get some control, and here I'm just removing the dirty root part, but leaving the whole thing intact. I might just wrap this in foil with a little bit of olive oil and roast that. Another way is to cut this in half and then roast that. That's another way that you can do whole bulbs of roasted garlic. So that's another really good way. But I think those are pretty much the main techniques for garlic. Let me know if you have any questions, and we'll see you on the next one.